Hello and welcome to another DK64 tutorial. Today we are going to be talking about how to import customly generated maps into DK64. So just as a bit of an introduction, I'm going to be using some map tools that I created that I made to be pretty user-friendly. They're not at a point where it's just plug and play completely, but still it only requires minimal effort for a pretty good result. If you look at the right hand side of the screen, you will see a custom map that I have imported into the game using the tools that we're going to discuss. And as you can see, it looks pretty good. I mean, it's got the vertex colors, it's got customly generated collision, as well as you can see surrounding the island that DK is on right now, you can see a green lava lake. All of which is custom features that we will discuss how to work on today. And so just as a note, this will require some knowledge around Blender, Cranky's Lab, which is the ROM hack repository, and the Fast64 plugin for Blender. And I'm not an expert in anything related to map making itself, but I did write and consult on the majority of the tools related to DK64 map editing specifically, as well as just ROM hacking generally. And so I will defer to those in the Fast64 Discord on more technical N64 specific questions and more nuanced stuff around map editing, but any other questions are certainly welcome in the DK64 ROM hacking general Discord. There will be a link provided in the description of this video if you want to join, and I suggest that you do, especially if you get tripped up on any of the stuff we're going to go over today. Also, just as a note, these tools are not perfect. There are some limitations which I will discuss, which can create some wonky collision or visuals as a result, especially if you're a novice map maker like myself. But for all intents and purposes, this is the best map making option available today. And just as a note, please join the ROM hacking Discord if you need any help. Okay, so let's get started. So the first thing you're going to need to do, if you haven't already, this is pretty advanced, so I'm going to assume some level of knowledge around the DK64 base hack repository. If you don't have any at all, I really suggest that you join the Discord and look into any other tutorials around just basic ROM hacking in general for DK64. But just to show you, this is the DK64 hack base. It provides build tools that essentially just allow you to drag and drop files into certain locations and specify what exactly you want to modify in the ROM, and then there will just be a build executable that will just patch everything up for you and then put it into a ROM, like you can see over on the right here, which is just a custom ROM where you specify all the replacements that you want to do, and then you can just hop in the game and test it, or eventually deploy it to people you want to go play it. So you should follow the instructions in the repository to get set up. That's going to include installing Python, making sure to check the option to add Python to the path when you do install it. Additionally, you might need to run this command right here, python-m pip install request, because that module tends to be left out for some reason. You also need to download N64 chain and add it to your path. You can follow all the instructions down here below. That should get you pretty close to set up. And if there are any remaining issues, just it would behoove you to just ask the questions in the ROM hacking Discord, because there are people in there that are ready and able to help at any moment. Additionally, you're going to want to, hold on, let me pull up mine just so I can follow along for a second. I already have it downloaded here. You're going to want to create this ROM directory and drop in it a dk64.z64 file. This is going to be the ROM This is the vanilla DK64 ROM that you're going to want to use for modification purposes. Additionally, once you're set up, following all these instructions and dropping this ROM file here, you're going to want to run build.batch and extractmaps.batch, the latter of which will create a subdirectory of all these map files, which include stuff like cutscene files, entrances and exits, the geometry, the collision, etc. So if you go here to the top level, you'll find build.batch, and if you run it, you can just ignore those errors at the top. And there's going to be some extraneous stuff based on customizations that I've already made, but if you see this here at the bottom where it does the CRC check and recalculates the checksum, then and it tells you that it built a new ROM and where it put it, that's a good sign if you get all the way to there. So if we go into the ROM directory, this is the packaged file that it had created, and this is going to be the ROM with all the modifications that you make to it. So pretty straightforward. And again, I just want to emphasize that you should run this extract maps whenever you can, because it will generate this maps subdirectory, and if you don't do that, it can cause problems with the map import specific tools down the line. There's a known bug, so if this doesn't exist, I know for a fact that it can cause it to fail. So just run extract maps, and then everything should be fine. In addition, I don't think this is specified in the base hack repo, but you should download Java. Anything higher than version 7 should suffice. This is specifically for the map importing tools, so if you're not doing map importing, then you don't need it. Additionally, we're going to be using Blender. I have version 3.6. I don't know what the minimum version required is for the Fast64 plugin, which is going to be the main plugin that we're using to generate maps. You can ask in the Fast64 Discord if you need to do anything crazy. Otherwise, if you can just find this specific version, I know it works, and it works great for me, so that's what I'm going to be using. And then lastly, you should download and import the Fast64 plugin for Blender. Like I just mentioned, you can find it here on GitHub. You can just go to the latest release and download that, and you just basically leave it as a zip file and then import it into Blender. It's pretty straightforward. If you have any trouble adding a custom plugin to Blender, I would just, again, ask in the Fast64 Discord for any help or find a tutorial out there. It's pretty simple. Okay, so now for the demonstration. For an example, I'm going to be using a map from Banjo-Kazooie for simplicity's sakes, because I'm not particularly good at, map editing from scratch myself, so that's why I sort of like to use Banjo-Kazooie maps. I used this tool called Banjo's Backpack, which has a exporter for its maps, which I used to get this Click-Clock Wood level entrance here, straight from Banjo-Kazooie. Okay, so now if you want to use a different map, or if you want to follow along, just make sure you get some sort of mesh that you can import into Blender, and then open it up in Blender, and then we can discuss from there. So let's start that. So here I have Blender. This is just a default scene. I'm going to delete all these extraneous objects out of here so they don't get in the way. Next we're going to import wavefront OBJ. That is just the format this is in. I don't know if other formats work or not, but this is a pretty standard mesh. And then when I import this, we should be able to see something. Yep. There's a scaling issue to start with, because Banjo-Kazooie maps are scaled a lot differently than DK64. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the side menu up here, and in this transform tab, go to the scale and type in 0.0016 on all dimensions. because this is about how big it's going to need to be for DK64 in order for it to look good. So as you can see, it looks a little rough, but you know, the gist is there. The brightness is certainly a lot. You can see there's an issue with the textures where this black portion should probably be transparent, as you can see through the foliage. But yeah, these are all things we will address. So let me go back to my notes to make sure I'm not forgetting anything. Yeah, like I said, from experience, if you're scaling from Banjo-Kazooie to DK64, 0.0016 looks good on each dimension. Any other custom map, just know that maps around 3000 by 3000 on the XZ axes are going to be a very large map for DK64. So, I mean, I would try not to do anything bigger than that. Additionally, 1000 units on the y-axis would be pretty tall. So there's not a lot of good reasons to go outside of that if you can stray away from it, because for one, you'll probably have performance issues, and in addition to that, it'll just be enormous. So it's probably not worth it. Yeah, okay, so first thing we're going to do in Blender is we're going to go back over to this sidebar, and at the bottom you'll see there's this FAST64 tab, which is from the plugin, which I've already installed. For the microcode, we're going to set this to F3DEX2. We're going to set the game mode to Ocarina of Time. And we are going to run this principled BSDF to F3D converter. And note there's not a preset for DK64 because FAST64 has not been modified for that purpose yet, but Ocarina of Time is natively in this F3DEX2 microcode, so from what I've been able to tell, the presets are pretty good for DK64. Okay, and so now what we are going to do is, let's see, what's in my notes? Yep, okay, so now here's the tedious part. We need to go down the entire list of materials and set it either to OOT vertex colored texture or vertex colored texture cutout. Cutout meaning the material should be transparent, like in the foliage that I had mentioned before. So let's see what that looks like. On this sidebar over here, you want to select this red circle where it says material. And if I expand this mesh over here, you can see all the various material types that were created from that converter. And what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to go through this entire list here, starting from the top. And then here where it says for the preset OOT shaded texture, you're going to need to change it to OOT vertex colored texture. And then additionally to that, you need to expand this texture properties, and you're going to need to change this format because, as you can see, the important thing to look at here is this TMEM usage. And as you can see, it's 8192 out of 4096 bytes, which means it's using up too much TMEM. And I'm not an expert on TMEM. I'm not going to claim to be. All I know is that as you go up in complexity in these formats, it's going to be using more TMEM. And so for this specific texture, it's using too much TMEM if we use this format. So we need to actually scale it down to color index 4-bit, which the majority of Banjo-Kazooie textures actually use CI4. And as you can see, when we do that, it changes to 2048 out of 2048. And so we are now in compliance, and this texture is good. And then we just go down the line. The next one, OOT vertex colored texture. Expand this down. The TMEM is too big, so we change it from RGBA 16 to CI4. And it fixes. Okay. And it's important to note that for this format here, the only two ones that are currently supported for the DK64 importer are going to be RGBA 16-bit and CI4. So do not use anything other than that, or it will cause issues down the line. There could be support for that in the future, but just for now, it's not there. And it's also good to sometimes use this preview down below, because it can sort of give you a hint at what texture you're looking at. And I'll tell you why that's good to see this preview, because if I scroll down a bit, this one, for example, I'm pretty sure is this grass texture, which comes out pretty bad from the Banjo's Backpack exporter. But if we change this to vertex colored texture, and RGBA 16 is actually fine for that, because it's less than the current allocated TMEM, then we can actually, sometimes it's good to use this primitive color box, and there's a color picker, and then what you can do is you can just select a green color that you think is good, and then usually it looks better for certain textures if you use that. So you can do something like that, and that looks 100 times better than just white grass. And yeah, that looks great. And you know, you can be as nitpicky as you want with this sort of stuff, but if you're just going for like a rough pass, then you certainly don't need to spend too much time on each material. Let me try and find another example of the cutout, because that will be something that you want to typically do. Yep. So if you go here, you can see this is one of the textures that needs a cutout, because this is like the foliage, and this black portion is meant to be transparent. So if I change this to vertex colored texture cutout, as you can see, that black portion turns transparent, which is what you want. And let's see if we open up this also needs to be CI4, because the TMEM is too big. And then let's see if we can find it. I'm pretty sure I just saw it over here. You see up here, this was the texture we just modified, and as you can see, it comes through as transparent now. And there are multiple other textures that don't have that yet, and so we would do the same for those. And yeah, so that's how you make something partially transparent like that. You just use the texture cutout preset instead of the just regular vertex colored texture. So I'm not going to do all of this, because like I said, it's very tedious, and I've already done it. As you can see, I already have a map here, and we're getting to this point. So I'm just going to open up the file that I've already prepared. Let's give it a minute, but there you go. And so all these materials have been set up appropriately, and additionally you will see that the vertex colors are there. So I'm going to show you how to do that briefly. You're going to go to this texture paint tab. You're going to want to turn on viewport shading up here. You're going to want to go to this data tab on the right, and under color attributes, you're going to want to make sure this COL is highlighted, and additionally you're going to make sure this camera is filled in so that you can actually see the changes visually. Okay, and then lastly, you're going to want to go from object mode to vertex paint. And then now you have a paintbrush where you can go and you can, let's see, start painting the lighting onto here. So as you can see, look, I'm changing the lighting. And if you want to see how to do it from the start, what you can do, I think, is you can go to just set vertex colors broadly, and that will apply to the entire mesh. There are more nuanced ways of doing, you know, just a certain subset of land, or, you know, like I just want to fill in this tree. I'm not an expert on Blender. I'd never claimed to be. So what I usually tend to do is I tend to select a dark preset to start with, and then just set the entire thing to dark. So then that's just a baseline to set with. And then you can, from here, start filling in things with the color that you actually want. I think it's better to start with a dim map than it is to start with one that's completely bright, because it just looks a bit uglier and more flat if you start that way. And then you can just come in and then just add the color that you want. Here I just want it to look like there's, you know, like an overhead light shining a path for you. And you can change the size of the paintbrush if this is too big, but typically I like to do broad strokes. It's a lot easier than the fine tuning. So you can just do something like that. Let's color this in too. And there you go. Oh, a little more. Okay. Yep, and there you have it. I think that looks 1,000 times better than when we started. Okay, so now that this is done, let me go back to my notes real quick. Let's see, I got all that. Okay, finally it's time to export the map. So we're going to go to the exporter here and we're going to give it a name. Just as a note, I would stray away from using hyphens and underscores because there are some inconsistencies in the way that the Fast64 plugin will output some of the names of the mesh, and some of my tools that I wrote will just fail in parsing them out because, you know, sometimes it'll do a double underscore or it'll do a double hyphen and then just the entire thing fails. So if you just try and stray away from them, it works a lot better. So just give it a name, give it an export path. Here I just have it set to export to this folder that I'm working out of. And here's, this is going to default to 100 actually, not 10. And here's a good place to mess with the scale. So like I mentioned earlier, if you import it into the game and say the map is twice as big as you actually want it to be, like DK64 is just an ant in the world that you've created, you can go here and then instead of 100 you can just go in and then type 50, and then it will just scale the entire output in half. Or if it's 10 times too big, then you just put it at 10, and you know, just mess around with it, and whatever you find that works can be your final result. And then when you're ready here, you'll just go to export display list, and then you click that. Oh, no object specified. You have to click what you're exporting up here. Click that, and then down here you see success. So it exported it, and then we can go to that directory and check it out. Okay, so this is not right. That was in there previously, so don't worry about that. This is what the output will typically look like. So the first thing you're going to want to do is just change this to model.c instead of model.inc.c. And this is the Blender output. And so let's go back to the notes so we don't forget anything. Okay, so now it's time to import the map into DK64 using Cranky's lab. So let's go back to the hack repository. So you're going to want to create a folder within this Blender subdirectory. There's a bunch already in here by default. This is one that I created earlier, but in it you can see this is extraneous stuff. Don't need to worry about these. But this is where you'd put your model.c and your header.h in this directory in Blender, and then in the subdirectory in the Blender folder named after your mesh. And it's good to typically use the same name across all of these just for consistency's sake. And then once we have this in here, we are going to want to open up build.py, which you will find in the build subdirectory. It's going to be right here. I have it open. So we're going to want to you're going to want to scroll down to where you see this right here,
generate map files created using FAST64. And the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to set this equal to true. Originally it's false. You're going to want to set this to true and save that. And then there's going to be some presets in here. I've already filled this one in, but you can just fill yours in accordingly depending on what you want. For the map name, this is just going to be a common name for the build output. For the map index, this is going to be the map index that you're going to replace. 175 happens to correspond to Frantic Factory Lobby, as you can hear the music in the background. Let's see, the path to model is the subdirectory that we just created in this Blender folder. So it's going to be in Blender / wherever you dropped your model and header. And then the output path is going to be maps / whatever your map name is. And this is why you had to run that extract maps earlier, so that this existed. And you don't need to worry about this already existing because it will create it if it doesn't exist. And this is also another important detail. You need to make sure that this mesh name is the same as your export over here, because all the stuff that it put inside of this model file is going to be named after this name, which is why it's also over here. It's very important. And lastly, we're not going to talk about it just yet, but there are water planes that you can define, and this is the place that you would define them. So if we go back to the game, you can see that there's this green lake around DK, and this is something that you would define here. So you would give it coordinates, a water height, you give it some RGB values for how it's going to be displayed, and you're going to give it a material type because you can choose from a bunch of different options, from water to lava to goo, etc. But let's see, once you have this in here, let's look at the script again. Let's see. So we set all this information for the map replacements. Now, once that is specified, we can run build again and see what it outputs. This is the portion right here where it says generating map files, where it uses the model file that we created to generate some map files for you. So the output of this should show up in, it's going to show up in two places. First of all, it's going to show up in the map subdirectory. You scroll down here, and this geometry file, this floors file, and this walls file have just all been created. And these are what specify the map collision and what you're seeing over here visually. And additionally, there's going to be, in the Blender folder named after your mesh, that's why I told you to ignore these earlier, this is what it outputs. So if you go into the output here, you'll also see the geometry, floors, and walls, but additionally you'll see these two, which are very important. So this build imports, I'm just going to show you really quick. If we open this up, these are all going to be things that you're going to want to copy and paste back into build.py. So if you copy that directly, go to this file dict up at the top, and you just paste it right here. These are going to specify all the texture replacements for your map. So if we just look at this first one here, it's specifying a name of the image for the texture, and it's putting it in the texture table at this index, and this is where the texture is. This is where the actual file is. And you can see it's named after the project that we're currently working on. And this is also good because if you have two map replacements, there will not be any collisions because they will be named differently. And so if we go into this textures directory from the output, we're going to want to copy this directory right here, this entire thing. If you look inside of it, this is just all the texture files. And we're going to want to go to the top level of the repository, into the bin folder, and we're going to drop it right here.
So that's where it shows up, bin/ccw lobby/ all your texture files. If you go in here, here they all are. Okay, so that's good. And then there's one more thing we need to do for it to actually show up in the game. We're gonna need to scroll down. It's gonna create this really long list in there, so be aware of that. And lastly, we're gonna wanna specify this map replacement. So this is what's saying in the maps directory that I showed you previously in here. This is saying map all of these files to this index in the game. So that's why Frantic Factory Lobby looks like this, and there's no enemies and there's no extraneous objects strewn about, which there normally would be. It's because I put in all this extra stuff. And if you want to do something similar, you can just go up to test map, copy all of this out of here except for geometry, floors, and walls, and just go back and paste it into here, and then it'll be empty, or there's a little bit of stuff in the test map, but it's good for just testing purposes. And all you need to do here is just give it a name, give it a map index. It can be, you know, pretty much anything you want. Just for demo purposes, I used Factory Lobby. And then for the map folder, you're going to want to point it to maps / whatever your mesh is named. Okay, so now that we've done all that, we are going to, let's see, we did the map replacement, and I talked about all the files that you can get from test map, and then finally the last step is to run build.bat and boot up DK64. So this is all specified now. We run build. It's going to show you that output from before, and that's okay. And it built. So now I'm going to close this. In order to see it, you would go to that ROM directory where we dropped vanilla DK64, and this is the modified one. As you can see, it was just built, and I'm going to open it up in BizHawk. Okay. And there you go. It's running, and we're just going to run through it real quick. And I'm going to use a Lewis script called Script Talk, just to do this more easily. I would recommend it. It helps a lot with debugging in general, because it tells you your position and it gives you a bunch of tools to warp between maps and zip around the map, and so it's just good in general. Okay, so I'm going to open that up. And there's going to be some errors, that's okay. I just need to go to Frantic Factory Lobby. And here we go. Look at that. Okay. So as you can see, that worked really well. And you're also noticing that there's this green goo in the moat that I did not specify in Blender. I can show you how that's done now as a last step. You don't always need to specify water, because not every map has one of these material planes, but if you want it, all you have to do is put in this value here. Water exists, you're going to want to set it to true, and then for the water planes you can define one or more planes just like this. And what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to give it XZ coordinates of the bottom left corner and XZ coordinates of the top right corner. So this is a rectangle that's defined from 400 400 to 1030 1030, and well, it's actually a square, but it can be any rectangle. The water height here is 8,
And if you're wondering how I got all these values, that's why I had script talk before. Was one of the reasons is if you look, you can see here that it tells me my exact coordinates. So I can figure out how big the plane needs to be, and I can figure out roughly like what height the water needs to be at. So like right now I'm at 16 units on the y-axis, so I know that the water height needs to be just a little bit below that. And it's pretty easy to figure out, you know, what dimensions of the rectangle that would fill in this moat just through trial and error. And then you can also specify a material type. For here I had moving green goo. If you want a list of all the material types, you can go to this mapgenerator.py file, which is in the build folder of the repository. And let's see, where is it? Oh yeah, it's up here at the top. Moving green goo is the one that I selected, but you can also just do water or sand or orange, yellowish lava, whatever you want. These are all the options that you have. I have not played around with all of these options. I just know that they are available for you to use. But yeah, so that pretty much concludes this tutorial. Again, I would highly suggest that if you got tripped up at any point here, that you would direct your attention to the DK64 ROM hacking Discord. Additionally, if you want any help related specifically to how to use FAST64 or map editing in general, there are a lot of people there that are willing to help. And I had a lot of people help me along the way building these tools in that Discord, and so I can vouch for how much they know and how good they are. But I will leave it there, and thank you for watching, and I hope this helped.